Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Heal with Kat podcast. My name is Kat, and I am your host, and I am so excited to welcome you to this episode all about what is family constellation therapy. And I feel like this is the age-old question that I get in my work. What is it that you do? What is family constellation therapy? We've never heard of it before. How is it different from traditional talk therapy? What's an energy field? We're going to get into all of this and more on today's episode. So first, I just want to thank you guys for leaving so many reviews on Spotify and Apple and YouTube because they make a massive difference, not only for the podcast, but for my work in general. I was sharing this on Instagram the other day, but without you guys engaging and sharing my content, it really goes nowhere. Unfortunately, that's the algorithm on Instagram. And TikTok does a lot better, but still, no one is like my community on Instagram. And so if you're joining me from TikTok, head over to Instagram and press that follow button so you can join the community that is growing in the Heal with Kat community. And seriously, every time I get a YouTube comment or I see that someone gives me feedback on Spotify or rates it and subscribes, it really truly makes my day because it means that this information is reaching people and it's landing for you guys. So thank you so much. Also, I want to update you. Don't forget on the last day of each month, I pick a winner for a free family constellation therapy session with me. And these sessions are sacred. They're one-on-one, they're 2 hours long, and we dive into your family lineage and history and see where you're entangled in some stuff and you don't need to be carrying that stuff with you anymore. And what I love about FCT is it's a wild modality. It's a wild type of therapy. It is truly life-changing. So if you're looking for a big shift in your life or some big change, please rate, subscribe, and review the podcast and screenshot all of that and send it to me on Instagram. My handle is in the show notes. And don't forget to screenshot me because I won't know where to find you if you don't do that in the case that you do win. So make sure to follow those instructions to enter to win your free FCT with me. So this week's title, what is family constellation therapy? Like I said, this has come up a lot. This is a very new modality for a lot of people. For people who know family constellation therapy, which I'll abbreviate as FCT for the episode today, they know it in a certain way, a certain function where there's people and there's a group and it's in person. And I do it very differently. And that's the way that I was taught and the way that I first was introduced to family constellation therapy. And this stuff really changed my life. I'm going to get into my story just a little bit towards the end of the episode today, but family constellation therapy really is transformative and it's also very confronting. And because there's such a big question mark around what it is and what it does, I took all of the information that I know about FCT and I tried to simplify it as much as possible for today's episode. And we're going to go into a lot of different directions today, but ultimately, everything is in service to helping you understand family constellation therapy. I also opened up a Q&A on my Instagram stories about 2 weeks ago, just refreshing, like, hey, just checking in. Does anyone have any lingering questions about FCT? And I've woven those into the episode today. So we will address those as we get into it. So let's start. What is family constellation therapy? Where are its origins? Where did it come from? Family constellation therapy actually originated in the Zulu tribes in Africa. And this man named Dr. Bert Hellinger was a priest and he was on his missionaries in Africa and he was with the Zulu tribes and he saw that they were using this type of experience to help resolve traumas, pains, dysfunctions within the tribe. And it was to help keep that tribal mentality together. He loved it. He really felt called to it. And so he took it back to Germany, where he's from, and he modernized it in a sense. And he started the Bert Hellinger School of Family Constellation Therapy. And it's still around today. Most people are trained through that school. I personally was not. My mentor was not, but my mentor's mentor was trained by the school. And that was less than 50 or so. That was maybe 50-ish, less than 50 years ago. And Bert Hellinger actually passed away like 2 or 3 years ago when I was in my FCT training. It like happened right around the same time. And so we are so grateful. Every facilitator is so grateful to Dr. Hellinger for really modernizing this and bringing it into our modern world. But it's important for us all to keep the sacredness of the tribe, of what the tribe brought to this modality, which is that tribal mentality. And I think that's why family constellation therapy is really shifting and changing people's perspectives, because I think that in today's society, we are very individualistic. We are everyone for their own. We've kind of let go of that ancestral, tribal, communal mentality. And now you see a lot of people trying to bring it back into the fold of society, and a lot of people are resistant to it, and they're really closed off to trusting people or being a part of a community. And so I just think that the best way that we get to honor the core of what the Zulu tribe has given us with this is to honor that tribal community and their sacred connection to source, being out away from modern technology, away from modern society, and really, really, really connected to source. It's the most beautiful experience ever. And in family constellation therapy, it really is helpful to believe in a higher power of some kind, because you're going to stand on those papers and you're going to be like, how am I doing this? So in a short way, a simple way to say it, family constellation therapy is this therapeutic modality, or this type of therapy that helps people uncover and heal the way that family trauma is being repeated in a family system, and that trauma is unhealed. And many times the effects of that trauma go unhealed and unacknowledged in our families, including multiple generations back. And that unhealed and unacknowledged trauma creates patterns of fears or behaviors or choices or actions or thoughts or feelings. And they are often rooted in that pain and fear of the trauma. So it continues down the generational lineage, and it repeats and repeats and repeats until someone wakes up and's like, something's not right here. I feel like this isn't who I am. And I feel like it's because of some of these things I grew up around. And I feel like I'm going to do something about it. Like, it ends here with me. And most of the time, that person is the one person that wakes up to the buildup of the trauma. So they're like the ones that are carrying a large burden of that trauma and calling it their own pain, or rather writing their story because of that pain. And they're repeating the same patterns of behavior and having the same fears as their ancestors and staying enmeshed in those patterns, and they don't even know it. And that's why a lot of times with FCT, we're saying that we are making the unconscious conscious, because we are repeating these patterns unconsciously. They're rooted or tied to a trauma that happened with our lineage. And family constellation therapy is much different than talk therapy, because we use an energy field to help us understand ourselves in relation to our family, and to step into the shoes and the energy of our family members in our family system. And that's how we help heal the passed down traumas. And I'll go into detail of what a session with me personally looks like in a few minutes, but it's more energetic, somatic, and experiential than sitting down in traditional talk therapy and just kind of like going through the motions. And the nice part about FCT is you don't have to believe in the woo-woo spiritual side of this work to feel its benefits. And many times people are super skeptical of it. There are people still very near and dear to my heart and close in my life that are so supportive of me in this work, but have absolutely no clue what I do, can't really describe it or even believe in it. And I'm okay with that. I read this in Same Soul, Many Bodies by Dr. Brian Weiss, who is a hypnotist who helps people with past life regression. He says, it doesn't really matter to me if people believe in it. What matters is that it works and it helps people. And I hold that very same value with FCT. You don't have to believe in the energy field. You don't even have to really understand how you get on a piece of paper and you have this very visceral experience. All you have to know is that it will and can support you and help you. Aside from the woo-woo, I also have spent the last few years educating and training myself and understanding trauma so that I don't spiritually bypass people's trauma either by saying something dismissive like, oh, well, your soul chose this, blah, 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 blah. It's like, yes, and Like, yes, I can channel and I can intuit the soulic side of things, or a past life version of you that's showing up in the session, or, an ancestor that wants to talk to us. But the trauma side is just as important, because the trauma side is what you're coming to me for. That's what we're healing, is the trauma. So we have to be well versed in that as well. So my philosophy is having one foot in the spiritual and one foot in the physical, really understanding it's two sides of the same coin, basically. And that trauma that you're coming to heal with me creates a chaos in a family system. And so what FCT does is it helps bring order back to the family system instead of chaos, because all families have a vibration of energy. You can think of it like a cluster of energy or a cluster of cells. And inside and around each cluster of cells is a vibration. And each particle of a cluster, each piece of that cluster is a family member. Or, I'm missing the obvious here. You can think of it like a star system. Every constellation in the sky is made up of multiple stars, but the constellation as a whole has an energy. It has a vibration. It has a feeling to it if energy doesn't vibe with you. And that feeling, that energy, that vibration can be affected by many different things. And in a family system, trauma is one of them. And so trauma creates a density, a blockage in people's lives and in the family system. It's almost like creating a stone wall around each individual person in the family, or as a family unit itself. And so the less healing, the less love, or even growth that happens in a family system, the lack of all of that starts to dim the light on the family system and each individual person. And so if that goes on long enough, if people are disconnected from love and growth and healing and connection for long enough, it starts to affect multiple generations. And eventually, people are going to try to act out because it's going against their natural form, their natural soulic part of who they are. They're disconnected from source. And so they start searching for that love through unhealthy relationships or drugs or alcohol or other addictions, or through their career or other behaviors or beliefs. An interesting example that comes up often with clients is a client saying, my family was very cold growing up. I didn't feel very nurtured or loved. So I went to look for their love through the same kind of toxic red flag behavior I saw in my family in all of my partners. Each partner that I pick is really similar to my mom or really similar to my dad, because you're searching subconsciously for the love you didn't receive in a very cold environment. Or another one that I hear is, my family wasn't very affectionate growing up and I really needed more hugs. So I started feeling empty and unlovable, and I found love and belonging in a high-powered career. That's really powerful for a lot of women. Like, that really resonates for a lot of women that I work with who are VPs and directors and, in these high positions in companies, who are so fulfilled by their career, and yet they are lacking in their emotional relationships with others. So the trauma our families experience blocks us from being connected to love and source. It has this lower vibration, this density that closes us off. And so then sometimes we begin to look for that love or that validation or need for acceptance outside of ourselves, when we really just needed it from our families in the first place. And at the end of the day, when we bring love back into the family system by starting with bringing it back through you, by taking off all the things that you're carrying, we're restoring something called life force energy in the family system. And life force energy is another beautiful way of just saying love, source, oneness, creation energy. Like, we are bringing all of that in a flow in the family system. When there's trauma, it literally blocks life force energy, because life force energy is love, it's connection. When trauma, that disconnects us from that. And so we start with you in FCT. We start by taking off the layers and the heaviness and the weight that you are carrying, so that you can remember that you're powerful enough to do it for you and for your family too. And what I love about epigenetics and FCT is that it cleans up or heals 14 generations before you and after you. And that's energetically and now proven epigenetically. I'm going to link in the show notes a YouTube epigenetics talk. It's by a guy named Moshe Sizif. He talks about epigenetics in a very tangible and clear way. He doesn't go over your head with this stuff. It's really grounded. So pop down to the show notes if you want to take a listen to that. But that life force energy is what connects you to your purpose, to love, to your truth, to your blessings, to magic, to connection, to spirit, to your soul. All of the things that you're meant to experience and have is connected to being in the flow with life force energy. And many times when I'm thinking about FCT in this work, I'm always thinking, why would we choose these bodies to be predisposed to certain things? Why would we do that? Like, what is the point? Are we supposed to just continue carrying this stuff? And is that part of what our soul chose, is just to continue carrying it? And I don't believe that. I used to believe that, oh, I'm going to have to suffer with this stuff my whole life. My parent had depression, so I'm going to have depression my whole life. And that's not the case. I'm literally living proof of that is not the case. It doesn't mean I don't struggle sometimes and have really low emotions, but at the end of the day, it's not my identity anymore. It doesn't identify who I am. It doesn't determine my value. They're just feelings, but they're not going to suffocate me for the rest of my life. And so we have to believe that the reason that we're carrying this stuff is to be able to understand how powerful we are to take it off too, and to be a cycle breaker. Because many of us identify with being a black sheep. And I don't actually really like the term black sheep. Black sheep's not my favorite term. I prefer cycle breaker. And the reason I don't like black sheep is because I feel that it has like a negative connotation, that people on social media or in society pride themselves on being the black sheep of the family because, they're different from their family and fuck their family and all these very separating feelings and emotions. And of course, it's healthy to have healthy separation with our families, but this is almost like in a negative way, in a revengeful way, in a condescending way with our families. And I used to think I'm the black sheep of my family, and I don't believe that anymore. I actually just think I'm a cycle breaker. And what I believe a cycle breaker to be is somebody that takes all of the pain and the trauma and the stories and the fears and the behaviors and all of the things that happen in the family system, and they flip it on its head. And they're like, all right, I'm going to see your addiction and I'm going to raise you love and compassion. I'm going to see your abuse and I'm going to see you, instead of being abusive, I'm going to see you as somebody who was also abused and needs a lot of love and affection. I'm okay to have boundaries if you were abusive. I'm not saying people shouldn't have boundaries. I want to make that really clear. Your boundaries are your sovereignty. I have boundaries with people in my family that I love very dearly, but I cannot have a deep relationship with them. But I still have love and compassion for them. It's just from afar. I'm not burning my hand on the hot pot every day of their stuff that they did to me. The reason that I think family constellation therapy is gaining more traction and people are a lot more curious about it these days is because I think, unfortunately, our ancestors in the last 200, 300 years lived in a time where the traumatic experiences that they had were never faced or leaned into or validated or let alone healed. I may even go back and say maybe a lot of the history of the world has been that way, unless you lived in a indigenous culture or the Zulu tribes in Africa or people that are really connected to the land and very spiritual, like Native Americans, the Aztecs, like they believed in something greater and they wanted to lean into healing and all of that stuff. So in our modern society, we're like, oh, we're reconnecting to this idea that we don't have to carry this pain anymore. And I think it's because a lot of us are coming back into this lifetime to break really difficult patterns that are lowering the vibration of our world. And I think we all feel that we need to be here to clean it up. But I really feel that our world is the most disconnected from our hearts than we've ever been before in history. And that's why the term cycle breaker and black sheep are, I think, getting so popular. I think people are soulically or vibrationally resonating with the idea that they came here to do things differently. But we just have to be mindful and intentional of how we are doing that. And that's not to say that our parents didn't break patterns of their own. I'm sure they did. And we always honor that in family constellation therapy. It just wasn't on a collective scale like it's happening now. So each generation has kind of picked up from the last, and we carry some of their trauma and stories in our own lives and in our own bodies. And It's like the age old saying, our parents' ceiling is our floor, and we will be that for our children as well. So that's why each generation has a responsibility to do their part. In family constellation therapy, I hold a very, very, very strong value that we are not in a blame pattern or pointing fingers at our family members, because you could point fingers back to the beginning of time as to why certain things happened, or blame people because it's intergenerational. Something happened at some point in history and it's been repeating and repeating and repeating. It's low vibrational, and it's not helpful or supportive to be blaming or shaming our family members in a session. It's not. We can still hold people accountable. Yes, your father was abusive. It was not right. Let's understand why. Let's see if you're enmeshed in any of that, and let's free you from it so that you can rewrite a new story for your family system. And my focus is to show you what is unconsciously, that word, keep that in mind, unconsciously running the story in your lineage, and how it's showing up in you. Like I said, so you can heal it and you can be your own free, sovereign being to live in your truth and be your authentic self on all levels. And that's really what helps you move forward. A lot of that, remember, that trauma keeps us blocked. People are like, I've been healing the same thing over and over and over and over again, and I can't seem to move through the block. It just keeps coming up. Well, maybe there's an ancestral tie to it. Maybe nobody in your family has ever been able to get through the pattern, to break it, to move forward, but here you are. And I really think that ancestral healing is like a bridge between you and everything that you desire. I think that your ancestors really, really want that for you. In fact, I know that they do. And it may be hard for you to believe now, but you have to know that after doing FCT for the last 3 or 3.5 years and speaking to so many clients and their loved ones who have crossed over, and all of the work that I've done with me on my own family, your ancestors are literally waiting to help you. They are waiting to help you, and they are waiting for us to help them to come back and do things differently as well. And I have a really beautiful story about that with my grandmother, my dad's mom. She and I have been deeply connected through all of the work spiritually and therapeutically that I've been doing in the last 2 years. She's been showing up in all of my sessions. Every single mediumship call I have, she's there. She's present. She comes and visits me in my dreams when I'm sleeping. During the day, I can feel her. And all of a sudden, she was gone recently, very, very recently. And I did an FCT recently, and my friend Julie, who does them, who is incredible, she's like, your grandma's not here. And I was like, I know. I think she's getting ready to cross over again, like to reincarnate. I don't see her. I don't feel her around. And I just think it was so beautiful. Julie said to me, I think that you have helped her do what she needed to do so that she could cross over. And I think she's going to come back as a badass. She didn't get that chance in her last life, but this life, she's going to come back as a badass. And I'm like, that's so cool. Like, somebody else is validating that the work that I did actually matters. Because the crazy part is that, and this is so common, I literally have multiple clients who are family members in their lineage reincarnated into the same lineage. So they'll get on a paper, or we'll do some mediumship or something, and we'll realize my client is the sister of their dad who passed away when she was young, or it's a great grandmother who's coming back into the lineage. And these souls are reincarnating back into the lineage for an opportunity to be a part of what you're doing. So when you're breaking these cycles, yes, you're doing it for you. Absolutely. You're the one that needs to be the living embodied change of the family system, but you're also doing it for your family members who are literally reincarnating back into your lineage for the work that you're doing so they can be a part of something incredible. And I just think that's the most inspiring thing ever. I mentioned how I facilitate a session, and I'm going to go into the details of that now, because this is where people are always like, you do what? And what is that? How does that work? And at the end of the day, like, you really truly have to experience this work for yourself to know the power of it. But I will tell you, or what I will tell you rather, is that if you feel a pull or a resonance with the words I'm saying in this episode today, FCT is for sure calling to you in some capacity. And it could be a vibrational match to something that could potentially help you transform your life, because there's been many times in my life where I come across a modality or a book or a person or a podcast, and I'm like, there's this little voice in me that's like, listen to it, read it, dive into it, look into it. And I ignore it because it's not this like screaming voice that we all think is like God coming down from the clouds, like, you need to do this thing. It's not. It's like this inner little like whisper. And then finally you see it enough times and you're like, well, shit, okay, I guess I'll do it. But what I will say about FCT is that it is confronting and it can be heavy at times. And as my friend Julie says, with FCT, we're not chit-chatting about your boyfriend or the weather. We're talking about heavy stuff. And there's a reason I really see people like once a month, if even sometimes it's every few months, because you are literally facing and healing the stuff that multiple generations of people have not dared to look at. They haven't had the courage, but you do. And that's why you're here. And I think everyone has an opportunity to heal a generational wound of some kind, and it has to feel like the right time and place in your life to do it. And really only you know when that is. So with me in a session, my sessions are always 2 hours long. There are some FCT facilitators that don't believe in long sessions. They think they choose to do their sessions for like 45 minutes. And that's beautiful. I've been in a in-person group FCT for 15 minutes and I had a bit of a shift. And I met an FCT facilitator once, Chelsea Green, who lives in North Carolina. She was a friend of a friend. And she said something so beautiful that FCT is like, it's like art. Every facilitator has a different way to do this work. Susan Crimes on Instagram, she does FCT with horses. There was a woman who followed me on Instagram for a while who does FCT in water. I'm not sure how it works, but I thought it was fascinating. There's people like the majority of the population with FCT that does it with human beings in person. And I do them with pieces of paper. So crazy, so random. My mentor actually did them with foam footprints, but I just think the pieces of paper are easy and they work best. And I really resonate with them. I love it. And so, it's one-on-one, it's on Zoom, and then we get right into it because I want to use the most of the 2 hours to really dive in deep and help you get to the root cause of what's going on. So to do that, the first hour of the session is like talk therapy. It's you and me just chatting and talking. All right, what's bringing you to the session? What resonated with you when you heard about FCT? What are some blockages that you're seeing in your life? Like, tell me why you're here. And then I'm like, all right, I'm starting to see the key people, themes, words, energies, places, experiences, traumas, situations. Like I'm looking at a million different things. So it's really just like talk therapy. And I'm asking a lot of questions. My intuition is on, it's ready to support and to heal. And a lot of times, my intuition in the first part of the session in the first hour is like, what happened at 3? What happened at 12? What happened at 16? Like I'm looking at all of these ages. I'm asking a lot of questions. That's a lot of time when people's loved ones will come through and want to talk to me and support you and help. So it's really this like dynamic conversation that's like a little bit of talk therapy, but a little bit of an intuitive reading. And we're just kind of figuring out who's important in this story that's keeping you stuck. And then in the middle of the session, right after that first hour, we do something called opening an energy field. We open a consciousness field. And when we refer to the field, I'm referring to one specific thing, like it's the energy field that we're working within that helps us to see the unconscious. I'll explain the field in just a second, but just to finish off how I do my sessions, we open the field together. You call in your ancestors. So I guide you through a little visualization and some breath work to ground you into your body. I open the field on my own. I call in everyone for protection. Like I call in literally your guides, your higher self, your spirit team, your ancestors, your spirit animals, and any other beings that want to be present with you during the session to protect you for your highest and best good because you're in the energy field. I call in guardians of the middle world to protect the middle world that we're in, because when we're in this energetic field of consciousness and the energetic field of consciousness is what's literally helping you feel what's on each paper. You can't do it without the field. Then, we're in this like middle world. We're not in the upper world. We're not in the lower world. So got to call in them. And really, like Archangel Michael, I literally call in everybody. So we open the field, we protect you, protect me, protect the field. The field is open, and then I assign your people, your key players of your FCT to pieces of paper. So like mom might be number 1. It's always different. Dad might be number 2. You might be number 3. Your future self might be number 4. And maybe I throw in the sacral chakra. And that's, I usually don't do a big one for the first one, but maybe sometimes I do, whatever I feel intuitively called to. And so you will not know what each paper represents. I do my sessions blind. So you just have this stack of papers and you've got like 5 of them. And I'm like, okay, client, I want you to take these papers and I want you to put them anywhere on the floor in your space that you feel that they need to go. And the question I always get is like, well, how should I set them up? This is the thing with FCT. At the second half of the session, when the energy field is open, we take logic and we throw it out the window. There is no need for logic in the second half of a session. There is no need to try to figure things out. There's no right or wrong. You, in that energy field, once I open it, it is working through you. It's like Reiki, right? Like you go to Reiki, you're laying on the table, you don't see the energy going through you, but you can feel it and you know it's there. Or even if you get long distance Reiki or a long distance transmission or a Kundalini experience long distance through like Zoom, you don't see it, but you feel it and you know it's working through you. That is exactly how the field works in FCT. So you've got these papers and I'm telling you, throw logic out of the window. Just put them wherever you feel that they need to go. And yes, there are certain ways that people set up the papers that shows me certain themes like addiction or war trauma or enmeshment or, rejection. Like there's all these things that I get to be the logic. You as the client get to be the feeler, the channeler. So it's really cool to watch people who are like, I don't really know that I'm that intuitive. You get in that field and you stand on those papers and I am like, you are channeling. You're literally feeling and channeling energy, which is just so phenomenal. So I have you stand on each piece of paper. I write down everything that you're experiencing on each paper. And what's interesting is that as you step onto each paper, you're not channeling you, you're channeling what's on that paper, but you don't know what it is. So it gives you a raw and real experience of stepping into the shoes of mom, stepping into the shoes of dad, stepping into the shoes of your past self, the heavy stuff, stepping into the shoes of your future self. And most of the time, that's really uncomfortable for people in the first time. So it's really just collecting information. I'm like writing everything down. I'm like the director behind the scenes, and you're on stage just doing it beautifully. Like there's no wrong way to do it. And a lot of times people will say, well, I'm getting on this paper and I don't feel anything. Is there something wrong with me? Absolutely not. Most of the time I will say, when people get on a piece of paper and they don't feel anything, it's usually a reflection of that paper. However, there are times where people have experienced a lot of intense trauma and it's unprocessed and unhealed within them. And there's a bit of a shutdown within themselves around feeling feelings because it's tied to these traumatic experiences that they've had. So it could potentially be a reflection of your fear of being on the paper or your fear of expressing those emotions. But most of the time, it's usually a reflection of that paper. If it's a reflection of the client because of the intense trauma they've been through, we just move really slow. My motto is we move as fast as your slowest part. Your body will also tell me things that I need to know if you don't think that you can feel feelings on the papers either. So people will, cross their arms, or they'll have nervous fingers, or they'll rock back and forth, or they'll be like, oh, my knees are really feeling. Every single like body movement or body sensation has an emotion or a description or something explanation tied to it. So you don't always have to be a feeler for this stuff. Once we've collected all the information that we need from you being on those papers, then I have you come off of them and we discuss them. And this is like where the light bulb goes off for people. People are like, wait a second, that paper was my mom? I thought that was me. Wait, my dad is in the front? Oh my gosh, we're all following his trauma? That's crazy. And what I like to tell people in this part of the session is that when they look at those papers on the floor and they're looking at how all of the things came up as they were standing on the papers, that is literally what is keeping them stuck. The depression, the anxiety, the addiction, the ancestral war trauma, the immigration trauma, the money trauma. All of the things that you're saying on the papers are showing me the traumas that are keeping you stuck, the themes that are keeping you stuck, the fears that are keeping you stuck. And so then that shows me where we need to go in the last part of the session, which is the healing statements. And I help you channel healing statements. And this can be the most emotional part of the session because people are literally talking to the energy of their mom, talking to the energy of their dad. And most of the time what I hear is, how did you know to say that? I've been thinking that my whole life. Or those are the things that I've always wanted to say to my family members and I've never been able to tell them. That is why FCT is so cathartic and therapeutic, because you don't have to believe in all of the mumbo jumbo in the energy field if you don't want to. But when I channel those healing statements, it's about you being able to say to your family members the things that you've always wanted to say to them. So we're honoring your family members. We're thanking them for giving you life. And then we're addressing and holding them accountable for the things that happened, having compassion for them, and then giving back the things that we are caring for them. And I want to talk about this really quickly. I had somebody comment on my YouTube and say, I feel like I've been doing so much healing. I'm afraid to give this stuff back to my family members. I feel really guilty about it. And I could do like a whole episode on this, and maybe I will eventually at some point if it picks up momentum, if people are interested. But you don't have to feel bad about giving your family members back the trauma you're caring for them, because you shouldn't have been carrying it in the first place. And yet here you are, breaking cycles, transmuting the pain and healing it. So like, first of all, you're kicking ass in life just by that alone. But when you give it back, if you're feeling guilty, it's because deep down inside, regardless of what has happened, you do have a love or an adoration or a deep caring for that family member. It doesn't mean that you're not still angry. It just means that there's a guilt of like, gosh, I feel so bad giving it back to them. Maybe I should be carrying it for them. That is what your subconscious literally primally said when you were a child. Oh, my mom's struggling. I should take on her pain. I mean, these are the primal things that we do when we're a child. So when we're giving it back, I understand the feeling of like, oh, like that's really heavy to give back. I kind of feel bad. Maybe I should still carry it. You're not in survival mode anymore. We are healing that survival energy in you to be able to give that back and trust that they have their own guides, their own work to do, their own angels watching them, their own ability to transmute it. And our family members are not incapable. They're not incapable. We may have developed the idea that our family members are incapable because of their addiction or their inability to live joyfully or their depression or a physical illness, but they are not incapable of doing their work. It's just that they are either so deep in their own traumas and their own shit that they can't see a light at the end of the tunnel. And all they need is just a little glimmer of hope to see that they can make a different shift or change, but they can't. Or it's a choice that they know that a better life is out there and they don't want to choose it because they're happiest just staying stuck. And so we get to freely give it back to our family members and say, listen, I'm not going to carry this pain anymore. This comes from somewhere in our lineage, and I'm going to give it back to you. And I'm going to trust that when I do that in this energy field, it's going to go back to the people it belongs to, and that those people then have a choice to do what I did, which is they can either break the cycle or continue repeating it, but I'm not going to continue to repeat it. And that's the difference, is that we have chosen to give it back because it doesn't serve us anymore. It doesn't have to be our identity anymore. So giving it back, we give it back with love. Remember, we are not shaming, blaming, or judging other people or doing it with animosity. If I sense that energetically, because I can tune into your guys' energy in the healing statements once that field is open, if I sense that there's anger, animosity, or shame or blame, I keep the healing statements very short, and I meet that client where they are energetically, and I move as fast as their slowest part. Like, it's not that emotional, but the words mean something. Other times I'm channeling healing statements with people who are very ready to give the stuff back and they are very ready to transmute it and move forward. And it's like sometimes I will cry during the channeling because I'm just like, oh my God, like this person is just begging to give this stuff back. So it kind of just depends on like where you're at on your journey, and there's no right or wrong place to be on it. It just is where you're at. And that's why you keep coming back to FCT, because we continue unlayering every single layer and unlayer and unlayer. And I will say that when we're sending it back to our family members, a lot of the times they benefit from the work that we're doing. And when we're sending it back, it can come to them in the form of an aha moment. Oh gosh, maybe I should work on this thing. Or maybe it's a comment that they make. Honey, did you ever know that when I was a kid, I went through this? We have to trust that they are being protected and guided by their own spirit team and their soul and their experience, that when we're sending it back, that it gets sent back not only with love, but hopefully with the idea that it'll shift them as well. So it may be heavy, but we can always transmute it. We can always alchemize it. We can always shift the perspective. So yes, it's heavy for you. Yes, it's heavy to give back. We give it back in a way that can be transmuted for everyone's highest and best good. And that's how we do it. And then after the healing statements, you come off, we talk about everything, and we do some affirmations, and then we're done. And that's 2 hours. And we do a lot in 2 hours. But the reason I love doing the 2-hour sessions is because we get so much done. And it doesn't matter to me if somebody comes and sees me once a week or once every 2 weeks. You just come to me whenever you feel like I need to move forward in my life. And I will say this too. You don't always have to do FCT for your families. I've done FCTs for myself and for clients with past lives, with past life connections with people, with businesses. Like my mentor put me in a constellation with my family's business when I was struggling with it when I worked for my family a few years ago. And like just stepping on the paper and being in the energy of it, it shows you so much. Like you could put anything in a field, and the energy field, the morphogenic field, is going to show you the truth about the situation. It's like a truth serum, a truth energy. It's incredible. When I refer to the field, I've been bringing this up the whole time talking about a session. When I refer to the field, I'm referring to the morphogenic field, the all-knowing field. And like I said earlier, there is a little bit of faith and believing in some kind of higher power that comes into play here. And I always liken it to a source field or universal consciousness. Sometimes they even call it a God field. You can choose whatever word you want. You can fucking call it Wonder Woman for all I care. But as long as you have faith that when you stand on these papers, you will embody a channel, a family member, a situation, a scenario, whatever the paper represents is what you will start to channel information on. And so this field carries the universal consciousness around what's happened, what hasn't happened, what's been said, what hasn't been said, etc. And so I just think being in the field is an incredible experience because it gives us a really raw, truthful peek into our energy, someone else's energy, our future self energy, and our relationship to the dynamic of all the things together and what's keeping us stuck. A common question that I get from people is, how is trauma passed on through different generations? And personally, I look at it through 2 different lenses, and we discussed this earlier, and that's energetic and epigenetic. The more tangible concept to grasp is epigenetics, because by definition, it's the inheritance of certain gene expressions which occur not because of the changes of the DNA sequence itself, but through other mechanisms like your environment or things that happen to you. So I'm going to give you a different example of that. Think of your DNA like an instruction manual, and it's all about you. Okay. It's Kat's instruction manual. This is how Kat functions. This is what she's predisposed to. These are the things that she might struggle with. These are the things that she might thrive with. Like, this is her personality. These are the things that make up who she is. In that instruction manual of who you are, there are hundreds of chapters that make up who you are, but there in those chapters are sticky notes and bookmarks and highlights. And so your body will prioritize reading those highlights, sticky notes, and bookmarks because those are the things that stick out from the manual. Those are the prioritized things that the body will read. It doesn't mean that it won't read the other parts of the book, the other chapters. It just might be that they're more hidden or harder to read, or they're not there yet. There's something about, wherever you are in your life that you're like, that chapter just really, I don't feel like when I read it, I understand it, right? So here's an even more tangible example. If you're predisposed to alcoholism in your family and you decide to stop drinking and you want to live a healthier life for yourself and make different choices to your lifestyle and change your environment, you will start to change the notes that your body reads around alcoholism. And maybe the next generation, and even the generation after that, or 14 generations down the line, people aren't struggling with alcoholism because you made this huge shift in your environment and in your internal environment that changed the way that your body reads and reacts to that epigenetic expression. Another example that I use often is that if you're predisposed to obesity, but you work out and eat healthy and manage a healthy lifestyle, you may never struggle with obesity because you've made certain different choices for yourself. And so you've changed your environment to support a new way of functioning, and you're rewriting that book. And that's the beautiful thing about epigenetics, is that you are never stuck with the things that you thought. I literally used to sit in my bed before I found FCT and I would cry and I'd be super depressed and I'd struggle with all these different thoughts about taking my own life and all these things. And I would think to myself, I'm never going to be free from this. This is literally going to be the rest of my life, because I saw this parent go through that. I saw them go through all of this depression and anxiety and shutting down from the world. And I'm doing the same thing. That must be the way that I'm always going to be. And that is not true, because with epigenetics, we're looking at nature, so your predisposition genetically, but we're also looking at nurture, which is your environment, the way that you were raised. But what we inherit epigenetically in our bodies is largely based on the environment of our ancestors or the things that they experienced. And that's the beauty of epigenetics, is that we can literally change our genetic expression at any time. I want to be sensitive, though, to mention that this does not always include certain health diseases or ailments or issues, or even certain mental health issues. Please take into consideration with this stuff that sometimes the trauma in our families has been carried on for so long, and it is so deeply embedded into our family system that it leaves a mark on our genetic expression, and it leaves a mark on multiple generations. So it's not to say that it can't be transformed and healed, because I do believe that it can be. I've seen it in my own life. I've seen my own health issues that I inherited drastically shift with FCT and the emotions and the trauma behind it, but also changes that I make in my own life. But I don't want to minimize somebody who is dealing with a serious generational illness or disease, but it can be worth it to lean into and just try, and then believe that no matter where you are on your journey, you are shifting something. You can do something to help yourself and the family system. These examples that I shared with you about epigenetics are physically how we carry the ancestral trauma in our bodies. The beautiful thing about epigenetics is that we can influence certain genes to change their expression based on the inner work that we do as well, like the emotional stuff. So when we're able to rewire these experiences, even though the ones we may not have had, then we start changing our internal response to what triggered those genes going, I guess, in a way that doesn't benefit us or help us in positive ways. And this is where I hold some really far out beliefs about energetics and trauma and things that have to do with our soul. And I said this earlier, like I've read all the books, I've thought of all the things of why would our souls want to be predisposed to this, and what would this do for us, and what comes first, the soul or the human body? Like, does the soul impact the human body, or does the human body act as a costume for a soul? Like, all of those things. And in reading Journey of Souls and all of Dr. Brian Weiss's books and all the books that I mentioned, I really had this moment where I realized that our souls very much choose our human bodies to be predisposed to certain family patterns, DNA expressions, ancestral experiences. I think that Walter Mackinson in Spirit Baby says it could happen anywhere from the second trimester until right before the birth, the soul will come in, and the soul just kind of snuggles its way into the human body and says okay, this human body is perfect for me to be able to grow as a soul. It's predisposed to all the right things for me. And I don't believe that we choose horrible things to happen to us. By the way, I still think that there is largely a component of free will and choice here in the human world. But I think that the soul knows enough about the human body and the human experience to be like, and this is going to be really good for me. This challenge is going to be good for me. This blessing is going to be really good for me. This life, this family, this town, this home, this school, this job, this partner, this kid, whatever it is. And so I was left with the question of like, what does the soul impact then? Is there like a soulic DNA that comes into play? I feel that we have two different kinds of DNA. We have our soulic DNA of like past lives, things that we have done in past lives that we're trying to learn lessons. The soul, also connects to the past lives or the energy of the soul of our family system. And so the soul will take on certain energies from a family system that are outside of the epigenetic physical bodily realm for its evolution too. I'm still in the process of trying to communicate with spirit on this, but they make it more and more clear as I ask. They're kind of just showing me visuals of how everything works. But there's a lot of ways that our soul basically says this person, this human body is going to be perfect for me to have my evolution. And of course, we go through the tunnel, we forget everything, and then we are on our own like Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts, just trying to get our patches. So like I said a few weeks ago on my Instagram, I opened up a Q&A about FCT to answer all of your questions. And I'm going to answer some of them now as I thread them through the episode where they feel right. And one of the questions that I got is, how do I know that FCT is actually healing my family, and what is the proof? Well, because we're working within an energetic system here, there isn't always a tangible proof. Just like when you go get Reiki, you don't have a tangible proof, but you know that you feel different and you've shifted or something has changed. When you get a Kundalini experience, like a CAP session, like you know that you're experiencing things and you know you feel different, but you can't actually get a certification that says, congratulations, you've broken this cycle. And so there's like this energetic ripple effect that happens because you're like part of this energy of a family system. Remember, we've talked about that vibration of a family system. You're a part of that cluster, that constellation, and that your soul has chosen. And there are other family members in that system, and they are also part of that vibration. And so when you're healing, because you're a part of this vibrational family system, I'm going to say that word a million times, when you're healing and you're rippling your healing out into the vibration of your family system, they're going to feel it. Now, like we talked about earlier, they're either going to say, wow, I'm starting to feel like a shift. I wonder what this is. I'm going to kind of maybe work with this. This kind of feels good. I don't know what it is, but today I just feel different, or I just feel like my thought about this thing, or maybe I should call my daughter and tell her about this random thing. I can't even tell you how many times I would get out of an FCT in the last 3 years of my life, and my mom or my dad would call me and be like, I think you need to know this. I was just like randomly thinking of this. And I'm like, thanks God, thanks energetic field. I actually really needed that. And so, yeah, in fact, there was like one particular story where like, I went into an FCT and it was with my dad's side of the family. And I had this really wild experience where I was like seeing and feeling some heavy stuff. And I was like, I feel like I'm making this up. Like, and I do this for a living. Okay. I was like, I don't know what it is, but I feel like something really heavy happened and no one's talking about it. And it was bringing up a lot of stuff. And I kind of told my sister about it. And she's like, dude, are you kidding me? She was like, her and someone else in my family just had lunch with our dad and uncle's like cousin, our like second cousin visiting from Lebanon. And he told us that this happened. Did you know? And I was like, I had no fucking clue. It was crazy. And I was like, oh my God. Why would he say that? I don't know. We were just at lunch and he just started telling us all of this stuff. And it's funny because in that FCT, that second cousin came up and I was like, I feel like he's here. You guys, I've had literally the craziest stories with this work. It's insane. But that is the ripple effect that happens. You're doing this healing. You're bringing the truth. You're bringing things up to the light. You're bringing the unconscious conscious. And then everybody that's resonating with that thing that you're healing, everybody that's also carrying that trauma in a similar way is like, oh, oh my gosh, I feel like we should talk about this stuff. It's just this shift. So you don't always know what the proof is, but you'll know by how you feel and you'll know by the things that are happening. I've always thought about doing a live family constellation therapy session on YouTube or something, or like on Zoom, so you could see what it looks like, but I haven't found anyone brave enough to do an FCT live with me because it's so emotional and like people are terrified. It can be very, very confronting and triggering, but if you're listening to this and you would be open to it, that I could do an FCT with you to show people how it works, like a full 2-hour session, or even maybe just 1 hour. Maybe we would do like the first hour privately and then we'd go live, open the field, and then people could like watch you go through it. Please hit me up or DM me on Instagram. I remember Aubrey Marcus, he did like a live internal family systems session with the gentleman that started internal family systems. I think his name is Richard something. I'm having a brain fart. But anyways, it was so fascinating to watch. I was like, oh my God, I love watching this in action. And it was so like writing down notes, like this is a good question. This is how he did this. So I'm like, man, I would love to do that with FCT, but just haven't found anyone brave enough yet. But going back to the papers and to the shift and all of that, this is how powerful you are in your family system. This is how powerful it is to be a cycle breaker, because you're willingly saying, I will feel this pain. I will go into the place that nobody else wanted to go, to feel the feelings nobody else wanted to feel. I will talk to the energy of these people. I will step into their shoes and I will figure out what happened and I will face this pain. But then once I do all of that, which is the hardest part, then I will choose to do it differently. And that's all about consistency and being intentional. So many people avoid this pain for generations. And then someone in the lineage wakes up and is like, what the fuck happened here? So it's like really powerful when someone in the lineage like you raises their hand and says, I'll do it. And this is what we mean when we say the ancestors have waited for you. They've been waiting for someone to stop the chaos of the trauma living in the family and to address it and heal it and do it differently. Another thing that you'll hear me talk a lot about in FCT is enmeshment or entanglement. And this is the way that we describe being stuck in the patterns of the unhealed trauma. When two people become enmeshed in a family system for connection and closeness, that coming together can be great in some ways because it's that connection, right? But if the connection is too close and it really affects the client's ability to move forward in their proper order without taking on their parents' stuff, that's when it becomes unhealthy. And enmeshment can show up as lacking a sense of self or lacking autonomy. It could be disassociation from your feelings, from other people, from what happened with your family, addiction even, or being in autopilot or survival zombie mode. Energetically, what enmeshment looks like in a family system is being jumbled together with all of the family members and living in the same energy or vibration and not knowing who you are and who they are. There's no clear boundary of separation of self. We got to address that because we want that healthy individuality in your family system. And that enmeshment and codependency, that's just our way of staying loyal to our family members. It's the way that we think that we are loving them, or it's helping protect us or help us survive, or our means to cope, even if we know what's wrong. And we do this out of love because we think if we love our family and our family loves us, then we'll stay connected and we'll bond to them, even if it's in harmful ways, because at least we're in connection. At least it helps us keep us alive. And again, that's subconscious. That's primal. That's like childhood 0 to 3. You had no clue you were doing it. Another question that I get that comes up a lot is the topic of adoption and how people can heal when they're adopted. I touch on this in episode, I think it's 49. I did a Q&A with all of your questions on Instagram, and adoption did come up. I timestamp all of my episodes, so you can go back and listen to that in detail. But essentially with adoption, it's a really beautiful situation because you have the gifts and the traumas from your biological family. You also have the gifts and the traumas from your adopted family. And remember, with epigenetics, you're not just looking at the nature of your genetic makeup, you're looking at the nurturing of your environment. So you can be predisposed to things in your biological makeup, but because of your adopted environment, you could shift things and make different choices or be, express different genes or heal them in a way. It's like a light switch, they say. The light switch turns on and off based on your environment. So yes, there's the gifts and traumas of both sides, but actually I think that people are adopted are coming in for an incredible opportunity for evolution and growth and healing, because they are taking on, yes, multiple traumas of 4 different lineages, but also they're receiving the gifts. So it's almost like the deeper the stuff, the more rewarding the light is, or the gifts on the other side. And to keep in mind that if you're adopted or somebody in your family was adopted, that it is complex and you'd have to look at them and all of their experiences. With every family system, everything is quite nuanced, right? So we're not going to blanket label one set of people, one group of people the same. With each FCT, the reason I love it so much is because you can get somebody who comes to me and they're like, I want to work on adoption, but their story is so unique to them that we're looking at all these different kinds of dynamics, and I kind of have to juggle multiple things at once. So in the case of adoption, just know that there are things that you can heal epigenetically and energetically, biologically, your adopted family. And for all of the traumas that you received, you're also receiving like double the amount of gifts. So there's so much to be seen and uncovered in that. And you don't have to know your biological family in order to get answers as well. I've done FCTs with people who don't know their biological parents. And in their first session, I put them, their biological mom, their biological dad, and something else. And they stand on the papers and they got answers to a lot of the things that they had questions about, because when you're standing on those papers in that morphogenic field, you are literally looking at truth. So maybe mom struggled with addiction and that shows up on the paper. Maybe dad wasn't there, and so his paper's somewhere off in the distance and everyone's like unaware of that paper. Just kind of have to look at the nuances of stuff. So I promised I would share my personal story with FCT, and I'll keep it short because this is a pretty long episode today, but I do want to share with you the impact that it's made on my life and why I'm so passionate about this work. And it's because it really, truly saved my life. I didn't read about it in a book. I didn't go to school for psychology. I have a degree in fashion merchandise marketing from FITM, but this work, it saved my life. And a little bit of my story is that I didn't have the worst childhood ever, okay? But there's a lot of ancestral, unconscious things that were happening that were causing my family to act a certain way that was hurtful or was harmful or was unhealthy. But if you looked at my family from the outside, you would have thought we had it all. But on the inside of the home, there were a lot of things that were very difficult emotionally. And so I grew up really struggling with depression, anxiety, a lack of purpose, searching for who I was. I mean, the number one thing therapists will tell me is you've lived a lot of life in 33 years. I've owned a business. I've actually owned 2 businesses. I've worked for my family's business. Now I own my 3rd business. Like, I went to school and I lived in so many different places. Like, I've just had a lot of life experiences. I've witnessed a lot of tragedy, witnessed a car accident at 16 years old where a Chargers football player died from a drunk driving accident right in front of us. Like, it was just, that was like kind of the start of when everything spiritually started going off for me. And I was put on antidepressants at 16 years old. And after that, I was basically a wreck. I wish that I had never been put on antidepressants. I remember going to this therapist who was like in her 70s, and she was like, I'm going to put you on this medication. I don't remember what it was. And you're just going to have to take it for the rest of your life. And looking back on that experience, I know now that I was a 16-year-old kid who witnessed something traumatic, and I needed something like, IFS or somatic work or EMDR. Like, I needed something to address the brain. Yes, I was predisposed to depression and anxiety and OCD. I was diagnosed OCD with that woman as well. Still struggle with OCD to this day. It's actually happening right now, and you can't even see it. I have this tick, I guess, where I have to touch the edges of things, the corners of things, or like right now I'm touching the stick for the Rode mic or whatever, because it's vulnerable to talk about this stuff. It's self-soothing. So like that comes from the war trauma on my dad's side. And I know that my dad's side of the family has OCD as well. So I just got diagnosed with all these things like really young. And then you introduce medication into the picture, and I just lost it. By the time I was 18, yes, in college. I remember having my first trigger warning for anyone who doesn't want to talk about end of life stuff. I had my first like suicidal ideation thought. I called my mom, I was freaking out. I didn't know what to do. And the only thing that we could think of was change the medication. So we kept addressing the medication. And I believe that underneath the medication were still this depression, anxiety, OCD, like sad thinking. But it just kind of was like surfing a very unstable wave well into my 20s. And I finally got off medication when I was 27. When I was 23 or 22, my parents got divorced. And around the same time, I went to an eating disorder treatment facility for my 12-year-long eating disorder that I had basically hid from my entire family. And I went in there with an eating disorder and I came out with a worse one because I learned how to have a better eating disorder in there. And so I gained a ton of weight and really, really, really struggled. I was in a very emotionally toxic and abusive relationship. I ended up marrying that person, and then we got divorced within 11 months. And then I was 27 and I was single and got back into the dating world and was really freaking triggered by that because I had started dating my ex-husband when I was 20. So I'd basically spent all my 20s with him. And then I started my healing journey, like really seriously. I'd been doing spiritual practices, and the first time I channeled was when I was 25 or 26. Like I had been dipping my toe in and I wouldn't understand it. So I'd lean out. Then yoga teacher training, I was like basically taking all these steps forward. And then after the divorce, it just really opened something up in me. And dating actually did too, because it forced me to look at my attachment issues. And, I had a COVID boyfriend and I was like, what am I doing? I literally have no clue what I'm doing with my life. And then I started spiraling. And then I found myself in the third or fourth time questioning my life and not wanting to be here anymore and being like, I can't keep doing this. I just feel like every time I get back up, I get knocked down. And I can't stay consistent. My life doesn't seem stable and I'm not happy. And I went to my cousin's house and I said, I need a life coach. I'm homesick for something. I don't know what I'm homesick for, but I don't want to be here anymore. And she said, I think you're divinely homesick. And I was like, oh. And then everything started making sense. I signed up for 6-month coaching with this woman named Carrie Gagne, who does Family Constellation Therapy, who ended up becoming my mentor. And she didn't tell me anything about FCT before. I didn't Google anything. And in fact, my cousin said to me, it probably won't work for you because it doesn't work for me. I do other things with Carrie, but just give it a shot and see if it helps. And here I am 3 years later, doing it full time for a living and sharing this work with others. And when I tell you it saved my life, it literally saved my life because it made me realize in the very first session, all of this stuff that I'm struggling with comes from something in my family. And some of this ancestral stuff has been manifested in my life as certain situations I've put myself in or certain people I've chosen to be with or whatever it is because of my need for love and my lack of feeling it. And so it was like this knowing within me, within the first FCT. I think by the second one, I told my mentor, Carrie, I want to learn how to do this. I think I'm supposed to do this. Like, I think this is supposed to be like something I do for the rest of my life. And it was. And within a year, I was in training with her. And that's how I met my friend Julie and Natalie. And and it was just kind of like, okay, I think this is it. And I left working for my family to do this. And that was a deeply terrifying experience, but also a very healing experience because I got a lot of blessings from my family. and my boss. And I said, hey, if this doesn't work out, I'm going to try this for a year. And if it doesn't work out and I don't like it, I'll come back. And they were like, no problem. We will always make room for you, which is a gift, honestly, because some people would not have that if they didn't work for their family. And even people who work for their family might, depends on your family. But within the first year, even though I took maybe like 10 clients that whole year, I just knew in my heart, this is what I'm here to do. And I've been doing it ever since. And it's been crazy to keep unfolding and learning. Like I do FCTs probably every couple months at this point. And I do them with my friend Julie, and she always laughs every time I book one, like, okay, what are we here for this time? Like, and it's just so fascinating. I did one yesterday, and I have some papers on the floor here that I'm currently doing some work with. But really, this work showed me that all of the things that I have struggled with for so long, they're not my identity. They don't define me. They're not me. They're not even belonging to the people that hurt me. It's the pain that I can track back and back and back. And there's no point in blaming or shaming them. I have had to implement the strongest boundaries on this journey because I have explored so many different emotions. I think the greatest thing is that and this is so funny because all of my clients say this after our sessions, and this is like the number one thing you hear after FCT in general. But now, after doing this work for so long, I can see my parents for who they are. And I don't really take it that personally anymore. Like, yes, of course, some things do anger me. Some things I'm like, oh my God, whoa, like why would they do that? Why? What are you thinking? And then that loving voice comes back into my head and is like, they did not know. They did not know. You did not know. You did your part. Hopefully they will do their part one day too. Maybe not in this lifetime, maybe in another lifetime. Anyways, that's my story with FCT. I could get into the whole ins and outs of it. I have so many stories to share. I feel like I just share them whenever they come up because it's so crazy. Like the things that I have experienced on the papers, channeling loved ones and finding out things that I didn't even know happened in my family until someone randomly says it, and seeing the truth. And that's confronting to see the truth. But this work really did save my life. And I believe that it's saving other people's lives too, in a way that, like not in a hero complex way, but I believe that it's giving people freedom to be who they are meant to be. And we have to look at the parts of us that we are holding back because of our families that are preventing us from being and shining our light. I just went to go see Trevor Hall at Red Rocks a couple weeks ago, and Valerie Jane, I think her name is, she was the opener for Trevor. Super unique voice. Honestly, love her. She's definitely like a starseed of some kind, not from here. Don't know why she's here other than to spread love through her voice and her being. Like, she is literally just a shining love star. But she said something really interesting, and she was like, you can't tell love how to love you. But we come here on earth to just shine bright and to celebrate the light in others. And I think that's really true. Sometimes we just have a deeper soulic responsibility that we take on to healing some of the stuff so we can shine. And I feel that really at the end of the day, I'm not really angry per se at my ancestors or my family anymore, because I have come to the mature realization that my family has always been in service to me. I understand now and have peace and acceptance that I chose this family to be in to help me personally be on the path that I need to be on to evolve and to grow. I have literally connected past lives to why I've chosen my family through the people and the themes. And at the end of the day, I will leave you with this. It all makes sense. It all makes sense when you dive deep into who you are as a person and you really learn who you are and you look at all the facets of your life and all the different kinds of people that you've been in the past and who you are now and who you may want to be in the future. It all is connected. And so we get a unique opportunity in our human experience to reconnect to that part of us and to shine our light through that and to be who we are meant to be. which is beautiful. So with that, I will close off the episode there. This was a long one, but if I could talk about one thing forever, it'd be family constellation therapy and how much I love this work. And honestly, we just scratched the surface. The best way to learn about FCT is to get into a session. And if this is something that really is calling to you, DM me on Instagram. I'm also going to link my website in the show notes. You can go check it out and see more information and read more information about family constellation therapy. I really hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Come hang with me on Instagram at cat_Dow and tell me what your favorite part of the episode was. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast and send me a screenshot to win your free family constellation therapy session with me. And you guys, I am launching something very soon, which is a new free offering. And it is a very exciting offering that is going to help you understand what kind of cycle breaker you are in your family and how to hone in on that and be the change maker in your family system. So follow me on Instagram and TikTok because I'm going to announce that soon, along with my new website refresh. I'm doing a whole rebranding. It's going to come out soon. So thank you for being here. I love you guys so much. And I'm wishing you a beautiful day wherever you are in the world. And I will see you next Tuesday.